Hello and welcome to The Wise Way. It's the 50th episode, if I can even say that this morning. And I've got a little surprise for you, or rather I haven't. I was challenged to do this by Alex Dean. So here you go, Alex. And enough about me. Straight over to you, Ben. Take the floor.
Thank you, Kirsty, and thank you for giving me this privilege to present the 50th episode. You clearly have terrible taste on host, but we'll discuss that later in the podcast. So let's start. For those who haven't listened to the previous 49 episodes, tell us all about yourself. Talk to us all about you, your background, and indeed your business.
So that's really interesting, isn't it? When you're in the hot seat, you suddenly go, oh, I've gone blank. So I started life as an actor, which is kind of very different to find myself now running a business. And I loved performing. I still love performing. It will always be my driving passion. And of course, I spent years studying acting techniques. So all of the training that I do today and everything that I do today culminates from my life experience. So I use Stanislavski in technique in my coaching, which is very similar to what Tony Robbins will talk about with, the whys and the wheres, but actually Stanislavski has 7 questions that you ask to get to the driving forces behind your character. So I use those and underpin everything that I do with that. But of course, I started life working. So my first paid job was when I was 8. And it was Heinz baked beans. Then I went and helped my granny and my mum working in catering. So from sort of 8 through to, or the in between the acting stuff that I did, I would do waitressing, even when I was too young to do waitressing. So I kind of started working really young. You could say my parents put me out to work. I don't mean that ridiculously. But then I got my first Saturday job working in a model railway shop, and I was the stockroom girl. I then moved to a dance shop. And then from the dance shop, I moved to a big department store called Orders, stayed there on and off whilst working in Harrods and Selfridges, working in every single department within the retail store. And honestly, it sounds ridiculous, but I worked from perfumery to computers. I mean, I remember the Atari coming out, the Commodore 64. No, I'm old. And of course, I was there at the birth of the camcorder, the VHS recorder. All of these things were big moments in my life. And then when I got older, in my 30s, it was the birth of the internet. And the birth of the internet ended up, guess what? I worked for Intel and I ended up teaching people to sell PCs. And this was at the birth of Centrino and wireless platform and technology. So, and I launched digital cameras. So when I look at what I do today, and of course, then I ended up in channel sales and then got to where I am today with KVDB. But when I look at what I do and how I help my clients, I can't think the word I want to use, but it brings in absolutely everything that I started to learn when I was 8 years old.
No, really fascinating. And actually, when you were talking about that, I could just see the real passion in your face for all of those stories. And actually, from our sort of past conversations through networking and socials, it's really tying everything together. So brilliant to hear. One of the other things I see with really successful people is really successful people tend to have that really early job, and it's a real trait that I see. Just a little bit of a probe really around your acting background. Do you miss acting at all? And I guess kind of the connection around that. I know that actors and actresses make such huge sacrifices and have lots and lots of jobs around the world of acting. Like, can you talk to those listening a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as an actor, there's a joke, and I don't like this joke, but there was a joke about why doesn't an actor open his curtains to the afternoon? It's to give him something to do, which is absolute poppy something. It's just not true. I used to work, when I worked as an actor, I used to run about 10 jobs. So I could be working for Intel one day, the next day I could be in Harrods selling Mac or Bobby Brown. The next day I could be going out and coaching or presenting or giving out free gifts through event management. So there was lots of different things that I did. And the acting work was wonderful when you got it. And I'm going to load that there because there is only like 1% of actors that are truly successful. And what you're doing is you are pounding the streets. There's a song called Broadway Baby from Follies, and it talks about walking off my tired feet. Pounding 42nd Street to be in a show. And that is exactly what you are doing. You are going from casting to casting. At points, you are taking a trolley with you, a case, filled with different clothes that you go into a toilet, you buy a coffee, you dive into the toilet, you get changed into the next casting, you set your hair for the next casting, you shake off the previous one, and then you go in and try and be somebody, not try, you create the new persona for the next role. And then you could turn up and you've done all this work, and somebody could just turn around and go, right, turn to the right, turn to the left, photo, thanks, and you're gone. And you've spent hours preparing. It is the most wonderful job when you get it. It is the hardest job when you're not doing it, because you are doing everything else, and you're going to the toilet when you're working in Harrods, literally checking your phone to see if your agent has called, because you're half there doing the job, you're loving the job, but you're also working with other people, and they're getting that call to say they've got a casting, and you're sitting there going, why am I not being seen? And of course, what people forget about acting is a lot of the time you're being cast because you are the right shape. You will fit the costume someone's pulled out, and it's very rarely to do with talent.
I can imagine it's very mentally tough. You know, I speak to a lot of people that have tried to build a career in the world of acting and really come to me battered and bruised. So certainly it's a tough sector, and hats off to you. Let's move on a little bit to your business. I'm keen to learn more about you, and we'll come back to that. But let's talk about your business. So I think for me, the thing that's really come through is that, to use the games analogy, focusing on your introduction, you had almost like completed it in terms of built all of those skills to run your own business. So talk to me a little bit about KVDB coaching, and talk to me a little bit about why you set it up and where the business is today.
So it's an interesting one, because I set up by accident. And I really, really mean this. So I never intended. So as an actor, you're self-employed. So you run your business, you run you. And of course, you're running all the other jobs. So I'd run a business for over 30 years without meaning to. And then it came to a situation where my daughter started school, and I wanted that flexibility. And I was desperately trying to find a job that would fit in, but one that would still use my brain. And I don't mean that rudely, I really don't. But I didn't want to just suddenly drop everything and all those skills and those wonderful skills that I'd learned through working in channel sales, and the business acumen that I then got. And the jobs that I could get were, as many mums will tell you, you're going to have to take a huge pay cut. You're going to have to change the way you look at things, because it's changed a lot now since COVID, but job shares weren't necessarily so, I can't think of the word I want to use, but they weren't so readily available. So I ended up launching KVDB. It was originally Opening Doors Consultancy, and I made a mistake with that. I'm really open about the mistakes I've made. So I launched because I wanted to launch as a brand, and I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want to launch as me. And actually the best decision I ever made was to drop the Opening Doors Consultancy and go out as KVDB. And what I do is I bring everything that's in my brain. I've got one client that I say to them, you just want my brain, so take a brain dump. And that sounds really rude, but actually it's things like, because I worked in channel sales and I understand about pricing, and this is a big thing that small business owners don't do, is we don't price correctly, particularly if we are a service. So we forget to add on that we need an RRP, we need a cost to the business, and then in between there is the money that you're actually going to make. So I structure things like that, and I talk to people. Because I worked in retail, I talk about a retail calendar, and I come in and I kind of do a couple of things. So I fix when you haven't got a marketing team, and I will come in and empower you to run your marketing, and I will empower you with how to run your social media, to create copy that will convert. I will then take that copy and make sure that that copy is actually through your website, your SEO, and all of that overarching communication that you're going to do. The other thing that I do is I work with corporates who haven't got a marketing team, and they might need a DECP, so a decimation, exploitation and communication plan, written for something like the EU. So I will come in and be the brand voice for them. I will do everything I can to replicate their style of what they are doing, and I will develop it, and then I will fill that gap for the project lifetime if that is required. So a lot of the time it can be that people are spending tens of thousands of pounds on a marketing agency, whereas I really firmly believe that marketing should actually be done by the people who are in your company. Sorry, everyone out there. So get a graduate in, get an apprentice in, train them up, get somebody who is mid-level in marketing, and then get somebody like me to come in, swoop down and empower them to go and deliver it. But I will also look at what you are doing with your go-to-market strategy, because that's what I ran when I worked for Hanwha and also dealing, because I ran the channel sales. So there's a lot of stuff that I bring that even I didn't know that I brought.
No, absolutely. No, knowing you, I imagine you get real great reward from going into a business and seeing those little things that they're doing wrong and helping. Am I right to say that, if I deduce that in the right way?
So yes, but I wouldn't say wrong, because I think wrong's that puts weight on someone, and I'm really big about positive affirmation. I'm really big about lifting people up. So I don't believe anything is wrong. I what is it? A happy mistake or a magical mistake. That's what they call them. So it's not wrong. It's a magical mistake that can be twisted and spun, or you can take and you've done it this way. That's great. Let's see what we can do and try it the other way. If the other way doesn't work, go back to the way that's always working. It's like a lot of people think, oh, my website's wrong. Well, actually, it probably isn't. It just might need a few tweaks. Another thing that I see a lot is that people have not been consistent, and there's a lot of words that people go, you've got to be consistent on your socials. The thing is, it's not consistency with posting per se. Well, that was good of me. It's more about consistency with your key messages. So I can go back to what I was saying 2 years ago and look through my posts and still see that I am talking about the same subject and topic today. So 2 years ago, when I really launched, well, 3 years ago now, when I really launched, it was all about video conferencing fatigue. If you look at my socials, video conferencing fatigue is up there, along with my video that's just gone on YouTube today. Video conferencing, yesterday, video conferencing fatigue, and that's that consistency. It's not just about posting 3 times a day. It's the overarching, consistent key messages going out to market.
Absolutely. No, really wise advice, and can certainly relate to that. One question I do have for you, because I hear this all the time, and I think whilst I've got you, I feel like it's wise to get your expertise out in this area. You did touch on this before in terms of that piece, in terms of I guess your own business is a really great example of, should businesses put their name? Should they show an individual, or should they be coming across as a brand? What's your advice?
So I struggled with this, and I'm clear on it. I was opening doors consultancy, I was hiding, and I started launching out on social media, and then I hit this difficult point. Do I write a post for we, or the royal we, or do I write the post for I? And it all came down to, I have a brilliant woman, Shayla Hall. Wow, she actually kicks me. So we all need somebody that puts us back on track, because it's very easy as a business owner to look outside your business, but when you're looking at your own, it just becomes a myriad of mess sometimes. So you need somebody else that will cut through that noise and the mess and get you straight. And she did that to me. And KVDB, the reason I didn't go with Kirsty Vanderbilt was not about arrogance. It was about the length of my name, because it's long. It's as long as Opening Doors Consultancy. So then it was like, well, KVDB. And everyone knows me as KVDB. If you meet anyone who's known me, it used to be the Elkin when I was working as just Kirsty Elkin when I was in those days. But after I got married, it was, it's KVDB. So it made sense. And one of the big things is, look at Coco Chanel, look at YSL, Estee Lauder. And I'm just looking at the beauty and the fashion brands, but actually look at the successful brands out there, and they are a name. Really big names. Yes, you've got some trademark names, but ultimately there are big named companies out there, and there is a reason that we can communicate and we can connect to a name. I know there's a thing of what's in a name from Shakespeare, but actually your real name shows a bit of vulnerability, but also we want to buy from people. So I do think that actually, unless you're in a real corporate environment, use your name.
Absolutely. There is that common phrase, isn't there?
You do.
I do. There is that common phrase: people buy people, and yeah, I don't think that could be more true. Talking about that people buy people piece, what I would be keen to probe a little bit more about is why you work with the clients you do. What goes through kind of your kind of planning structure when talking to a new prospect, in terms of, they would be a good fit for me, I would be a good fit for them. Why do you work with a client?
So I like the companies that have got a challenge. I'm going to be really honest. I'm quite ballsy, and you know,
Mm.
I know that I can be quite intimidating. I don't mean to be, but yeah, I know that I've got this big personality, and I can be quite loud, and you know, I make no apologies for that because at my age, it's taken me a long time to be comfortable in my own skin.
Mm.
But I like to work with quite. I guess my clients are quite similar. That they tend to be neurodiverse like myself.
Mm.
So, you know, I am dyslexic and dyspraxic, so I understand that. We don't
Mm.
see things in a linear way. We like to look out the box, and then it's about bringing all that out the box thinking down into a structure. So we
Mm.
tend most of my clients tend to have a mind map, but they just want a streamline, but it's a streamline that will work for them. And because we tend to be on the neurodiverse level, it tends to work.
Mm.
I work with both men and women, and
Mm.
for me, it's all about empowerment, but I
Mm.
tend to work with very niche engineering, actually, or technical, or something that other marketers, because it's not, I don't tend to do fluffy stuff. I don't
Mm.
mean that rudely again, but I tend, as much as I have a background in skincare and makeup, I've only got one client that does skincare and makeup. Um,
Interesting.
so most of my clients are engineering, or again, because I suppose I worked in IT and technical, the stuff
Mm.
I work on tends to have some kind of technical aspect to it. And because other marketers might not have my background, that's where I can add value. And the
Mm.
reason people work with me is because I do a thing called listening. So I know it's really strange, but you know, years ago I learned we've got two of these and one of these. So I tried to keep this one shut. And rather
Mm.
than bombarding them with ideas, I try to get by starting with what their end result is. And
Mm.
it's like, what do you want? And I don't tell them what to do. That's the big thing. I work with them and I become part of their
Mm.
team. So I don't
Mm.
sit there and go, you must, because that's pressure. You will, it's pressure. I'm always about how about, and let's explore. Okay, why don't you want to do that? That's fine. Let's not do that. I put a video out
Mm.
that don't go on camera if you don't want to, because it's important. If you don't want to go on camera, don't do it. Stop
Exactly.
listening to all the noise out there. So I try to build a structured plan that is deliverable by them, that works for them, that will get them to the end result without giving them a huge amount of overwhelm. Because if you're a small business or even a large business without a marketing team, nobody's got time.
Mm.
So I try to create, by using content that you've already got and repurposing it, a
Mm.
structured plan that will streamline and deliver a good return of investment of the investment you give to me by paying me, but give you the end result that you want.
No, really good advice. Really good advice. And just continuing on that, just to probe a little bit more, I think there's always a bit of fear, isn't there, around marketing? I think that if you're a marketeer, you love it, you smile like you're smiling right now. But I think that for some businesses, particularly in that space that you were talking about in terms of engineering and certain types of technology, a couple of businesses are coming to mind at the moment. It's quite scary, isn't it, taking that step in terms of working with somebody like yourself, in terms of building that marketing, building that sales funnel, building that client strategy. Does it need to be scary? And can you talk through somebody who's listening at home or listening in their office, what they could potentially expect from having that initial conversation with you, and what that looks like?
So it goes back to totally listening. The first thing we always start off with is a strategy meeting. And that
Mm.
strategy meeting is a brain dump. And it really is. I want to hear everything about your business. And we sit down and we do different exercises. And those exercises will get us down to hone it all the way. You're exhausted at the end of it. And so am I. I'm not going to say I'm not. It's 3 hours of intensive, your business. And sometimes it needs to be two. And we hone it right the way down to, this is why people come to you. This is what you do. This is how you serve. And this is how somebody feels when they work
Mm.
with you or they buy from you. So we create this whole structure, and it takes a lot. It's a lot of work, but from there, we've then got the foundation for your marketing. And what's really interesting, every time I do it, the customer has the answers. They've just never had the sounding board, the person sitting the other side to go, right, let's write that down. Let's write this one. Let's put that there. Let's put it there. And it's this huge, I mean, it's huge, but my goodness, you've got years of content after that. And a lot of times I just do the strategy meeting and then people fly. And it can just be that intensive, let me listen to your business. Okay. I also look at what you're already doing. So before we have that strategy meeting, I've gone and looked at all your socials. I looked at your website. I've already come with ideas in my own head that I know that I think could twist and tweak with tweaks. And I don't talk about, I'm not about erasing everything and starting again. I am about tweaking and tweaking and tweaking, because marketing evolves. And one thing that you also, I was talking about this yesterday, you don't necessarily want to plan your marketing too far in ahead. You might have an overarching plan, but things happen. COVID. We have disasters that happen. And if you've got your marketing planned to go out and it's not appropriate for something that's just happened, you need to get it down quickly. So sometimes if you're planning too far advanced, you need to really think about, have I got the space to react to something if it happens? So you need to have your plan behind, but not necessarily have it all structured, ready, scheduled to go out, because if you've scheduled it, you've then got to go back in and unschedule it. So there is a sweet spot about not scheduling too far advance as well.
Absolutely. No, I can definitely resonate with that. As you know, I host a radio show, and we record the radio show in advance, and we had a guest on that was amazing, really, really good. But working within the HR space, and something happened very big within her organization. It was all over the papers, all over Central News, BBC News, and the show was going out on the Sunday as Sunday Morning News was saying exactly what happened. So we all make mistakes, don't we? And as I'm sure you can imagine, that was little bit stressful. Kirsty, I think one of the things that I've always really admired about you, and I think always really come through, is just strength for the people around you. I can think of 5 or 6 times that I've seen you really supporting somebody, and really, I guess, being that shoulder, but also that rock, I guess. Who is your, I guess, why, and who is your rock? Who inspires you, whether that be business or personal?
So it's my husband, 100%, Dennis. Wow, when he came into my life, it was just like, I didn't know I needed someone like Dennis. I didn't know. I'd had quite and most people know this, I'd had quite a up and down life. There'd been lots of trauma within that life. It's not been easy at times. And when I met Dennis, I was very defensive. I was still desperately trying to be an actor, and still trying to juggling all these jobs. And my husband just cuts through everything. He is the voice. He can give me a look across the room. I know instantly what he's thinking. He's the only person, interesting, that can pull me back and calm me down. He is 100% my rock. And he is the person that keeps me straight. He is the person that gave me the seed money for the business, the first £2,000. He has me, and I have him, and we have such a beautiful, wonderful Hope family life. And of course, my daughter, she is brilliant at cutting through anything. So my family, my husband, my daughter, my mum is really good. I'm on the phone to my mum at least 3 times a week, normally on the school run. She has no idea what I'm talking about. She says to me, I used to understand what you talk about, but now I've got no idea. And I'm listening, but it's going over my head. And remember, I'm retired, and it's hurting now. And I can hear my dad in the background going, all right there, what is it today? And then my brother, who works, he's there as well. So when it gets too much, and particularly with HR stuff, and I've got some stuff I've got to sort out today, I can lean on Graham. So my family is really important to me, and they are my rock. We've gone through a lot of stuff together, but Dennis is my lasso. He holds me firmly to terra firma.
No, absolutely. No, absolutely. And just building on that, that was a really honest overview. But knowing me, I like to turn things into advice. Going from being in a tough place and not knowing you needed that support and then having that support, what would be your advice to potentially somebody listening who feels that they were in that place that you were before you met Dennis? What did you need to do to let Dennis in?
It's really interesting. That's a really good question because I didn't realize just how lonely I was. I'd become very independent, too
Mm,
independent. I'd become very resilient on myself, and I didn't let anyone in. And I think
mm,
what the difference here was Dennis never told me what to do.
okay.
And I'd got to that point where if somebody told me what to do, then it was almost like I couldn't accept. It was not that I couldn't accept advice, but I'd become very too self-reliant. So I'd been
Mm,
right down at the depths. I'd been divorced, and suddenly I was running lots and lots of jobs. I was very successful at running the jobs, but I was tired. I was
mm,
exhausted, and I needed somebody to just stand in my way
mm,
and stop me. And that's exactly what he did. And I think the way he did it, and I think back to this because he's younger than me, and I wouldn't go out with him because he's younger than me. He just stayed as a steady heartbeat. So I guess the thing is, if you find somebody that you know is worth it, that
mm.
you know has a really soft heart, because I do, I'm soft as putty, but I come across as tough as nails. But if you've got somebody who is, you can see that they are really worth it, or you know
Mm,
that you've become tough as nails, look for the person that is the consistent heartbeat in your life.
mm,
The
mm,
person who is just always there. The
mm,
person who is just, I don't know, going down to your parents and putting your belongings in the back of the car because you're refusing to move in with them, but you get back to their house and you find that your belongings are in the back of the car. Find that person, the person who is just constantly there. And if you are closed off like I was, take
mm,
the blinkers off.
mm,
Trust, because
mm,
I'd lost my trust. I'd lost my faith.
mm,
Um, I'd lost my belief because the divorce really hurt me. I'm not going to sit there and say it didn't.
mm,
It it had to happen. Um, it had to happen because for both of us, we were both in a toxic situation, and it had to happen. It doesn't mean that it was an easy decision to make. I'd
absolutely.
been married by that point for 12 years. I've now been married and with Dennis longer, but I still care about that person. So I
Of
think
course.
what Dennis did for me was he allowed me to, that's what he did. He allowed me to still care for the person that I'd left without any jealousy.
Mm,
He said it was okay. Whereas other people that I'd been hanging out with, that I'd gone out with, felt uncomfortable about having an ex-partner of
mm,
quite a big ex-partner. Whereas Dennis was like, yeah, I'm not threatened by that.
yeah.
So I guess that's it's difficult to say what would I do as advice, but I would say to somebody who is in my position, look for the constant support
Mm,
and the heartbeat, and just lift those blinkers.
mm, mm. I'm gonna challenge you there because I think that sentence you said, it's difficult to say what I would do as advice. I think you're absolutely wrong because you've just given a good 3 minutes of really solid advice there. So I'm pushing back on you on your own The Wise Why episode 50. Who would have thought it? Right.
I think it's because I don't like giving advice. That goes back to how I work. I want to listen to what people want and the end result. So
Mm,
I think advice is lovely.
mm.
It happened yesterday. Someone said to me, I'm not charging enough. So I just turned it back on them. I didn't give them the advice, but they thanked me for my advice. And I was like, but you said it.
No, always good, always good. Let's go back to something you touched on there. I mean, you skimmed past it in terms of in your own life, in terms of that you were working lots of different jobs, and it is and wearing many hats, and that is a real trait of an entrepreneur, isn't it? Saying yes, 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 seeing opportunities and doing them. What's your advice under that umbrella, and what have been your own experiences, and what would you say to those listening in terms of um, is it fine to wear lots of hats? Is it fine to overwork yourself? Is it fine to do all of these things? Or in hindsight, should you maybe not?
You should say no. You should learn to say no. You have to learn. The one thing I keep banging on about at the moment is boundaries, and you have to know your no. If you don't know your no, you will burn out. So learning my no came at a price for me. It came at a price that I didn't recognize it, and I blew my life up. So I went to an event, working in events, and I was unprofessional. I was totally unprofessional because I didn't recognize I was burnt out. If I had realized at that point, I wouldn't have gone to the event. I would have said no. The contract that I was supposed to be working on, I knew was a no for me. I knew it was a no, but I didn't have the guts to say no. And I blew my life up. So know your no. It's so important. And I now stand by that. And I will say no when I need to. And that includes leaving a job. So if you stay in a job too long, you become toxic. Recognize it. I stayed too long in my last job. I became toxic. I'm very honest about that. I didn't say no quickly enough. I knew I was saying no because I was looking for other work. Sorry, Manisha. But really sorry. But I didn't know how to say no. So there's been a couple of times where I didn't say no quick enough, but now I say no. And I swear everybody, the one thing you must do as an entrepreneur, the one thing you must do as a small business owner is know where your limit is.
No, really, really good advice. Really good advice. Let's get back into the KVDB coaching. Let's get back on that, and let's talk about these 3 years. So over the 3 years, what have been your mistakes? What have been your hurdles along the lines? What have been the bits that actually, in hindsight, if you were to rewind and do the business again, what would you have done differently?
So my branding, first of all, oh my goodness. I didn't take advice, and I'd set up a business. I guess the first thing is overwhelm, imposter syndrome, all of these buzzwords that we talk about, but actually overcoming them was really, really important. So I set up at the beginning of COVID and then closed the business down and went dormant for a year because it wasn't the time. So I couldn't have changed that. But then when I did launch, I launched backwards actually. So I would always start with a website now. I would never start with a social media page. I would always start with my website because your website is where you disseminate everything from. Your website is the most important aspect of your business. You want to put everything on your website and then put it all out across your socials. So I would say start your website first. I would not have spent hours and hours and hours building my own website. I would have outsourced that right at the beginning if I had known what it would do for my business. I would have changed my name. I would have come straight out and been brave with KVDB, but I wasn't ready to be brave and come out with KVDB. There was a lot of acting stuff still on my back, and I needed to learn to do that. I would have started going on camera earlier. I would have launched a podcast earlier because this is an accidental podcast, just like my business was an accidental business. And yet these two things are the things that changed things in my entire life. So I'd have been braver and not worried about what everybody else was going to say. And one thing I've learned is everyone's got an opinion on what you should, must, could do. But actually, you've got to trust your head and your heart and follow that. But I'm going to turn this back on you and go, I'm sure you have done the same things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I always plan to set up my own business at some point. Was that going to be a recruitment business? I had no idea, and I probably hadn't considered it. And I was asked whether I'd set up a recruitment business with Mike Terry, the Terry and Thompson and Terry. And it has worked well. But actually, over those period of times, I think that we started the business with a bit of a backwards idea in terms of we both put 250 quid into the business, but we both had we both said that we won't take any money out of the business, so we had salaries behind us. So I think what that probably did in the first year in some ways has made us a little bit lazy in some ways, because I think that we absolutely were driven to get our values out and to get our brand out and all of those kind of things. But actually, we weren't too worried about revenue. And I think that actually revenue is always a big part of a commercial business. And I think when we got into year 2, from the first month of year 2, revenue was double any other month in year 1, without doing anything differently. And I think it was the fact that we knew that then it's got to start paying us a salary. I think the thing that I always get challenged on under the marketing umbrella, which I still think I did the right thing and I was strong, was keeping the brand Thompson and Terry when I bought the business out in 2018. And the reason for that is that Mike's great. I get on with him really well, and I just wanted to buy him out because I wanted to have the whole pie and I wanted to put my stamp on it. But Mike was good. There was nothing that I wasn't proud of about the business, and we had built a brand. We ranked well on Google. We had, and only really small things. And it probably wasn't about the money, but we had, a reputation. We had people knowing us, people liking us, people trusting us. And actually 6 years or 5 years down the line, I can't do maths clearly, 5 years down the line, for people to say, oh, who's Terry? For me to say that story and for actually say, yeah, he was one of the founders and I bought him out 5 years ago. I don't mind that. So I think that was wise. I think that the biggest mistake that I ever made in business a million times over is once I did the really wrong thing. And I think that when I bought the business out, you always think, do you know what, you need to put your stamp on it. And there was one scenario that I'd read lots of business books and I decided, do you know what, I want to scale. I literally tripled my marketing spend. I doubled the size of the office. I doubled the size of the workforce. And I really, really went for it with him a month after buying the business out. And actually, I think that I took one hire that I probably shouldn't have done. They approached me, but nevertheless, I probably shouldn't have done. And actually, I've always regretted that. And actually, that what I was probably trying to do with the business was to grow it to be something that wasn't me, because I'd spent a lot of money buying it out. And then actually, within 3 months, I really realized that was a mistake, and we scaled back down to where we were before. And I think that our business was a lot stronger for it. So there's definitely positives, but nevertheless, I've definitely made mistakes along the line.
I love that, the scaling up business, because I'm just about to do that. I'm coming off this call and I'm talking to somebody and I'm having that, how do I employ them? How do I work with them? And IR35 is a concern. I was reading about that last night, and it is that scale of how do you do it? And I've wanted to do it very similarly, but without. I very much want to run the business with money in, money out, so the business has no debt. And I've taken a little bit of a salary, but not a huge salary. And this is the first year that I can take a salary, but it won't be huge, but it's nice. And but I also need to invest because, and something that you touched on there, what is the best use of our time? And my time is not necessarily spent doing my own marketing, which sounds a bit crazy. And I don't mean not using my own voice, because I refuse to have someone else answer any posts. But the designing and the execution and the post, the actual putting out of the post, maybe it's not the best use of my time, because I earn more going out and helping other people. So yeah, I think that's the mistake that a lot of people also make, is we aren't prepared to give a bit of our business away because we're scared. But you did it bravely. So I think hats off to you. I'm going to clap. So I get to do a question, because I've seen the time, so I get to do a question to you. I have to say, it is weird sitting in the guest seat. It's been very interesting, but also very strange. So I've got to ask you a question, of course, and then I've got to think about it. I want to know, because you're young, okay? If you bought the business out in 2018, you're still really young. You're a young entrepreneur. So what advice have you got for somebody who might be at school, maybe 18, 19, knows they want to launch a business, but doesn't have the confidence, or doesn't quite know what, as you said, you fell into recruitment. What advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Gosh, that's a good question. I can tell you do this as a job, Kirsty. For me, I think that my biggest piece of advice is the toughest part of running a business is actually making that decision to start doing it. And I appreciate that's such a corporate answer, so I'm going to build on that a little bit. when you're X age with children and families and mortgages, etc., you absolutely have stuff to lose. But I think that as that 18-year-old, and I think my probably biggest regret isn't setting up a business earlier. I was very calculated in what I was doing in terms of each role to build my skill set to be able to run a business. But actually, in reality, I think if I look back to that 18-year-old self, I think it would have took me a little bit longer to get to the stage where I could run a really good business. But actually, most 18-year-olds, not all with different circumstances, but most 18-year-olds live at home with family and have quite low outgoings. And I think that if you are in that scenario, I always think that society teaches us that we need to earn a good salary, that we need to have a nice car, and we need to have, if you're 18, nice trainers. But actually, I think I would always say, what is the worst that could happen and what would be the result if the business didn't work? So I think if you've got a dream and you want to try and run your own business at 18, and I set up my business at 23, and I think I would have done it 5 years. Yeah, I would have done it maybe even sooner than that. No, I'd have probably done it at 19, 20, I think. But I think that if you've got that dream, think about what have you got to lose? I think that if your decisions are going to impact others, you need to think very, very long and hard, very, very long and hard. But if your decisions are going to mean that you can't go to, where do the kids go now? Ibiza, on your holiday, or Marbella, or whatever. It was Magaluf and Benidorm in my day. Anyway, that's another story. There's not that much, when I set up my business, I sold my fancy car. That paid for my year of salary, and actually, I think that the sooner you start, the sooner you'll start your learning. And actually, by the time you get to the stage where you would have done it previously, you're probably going to be a lot more steps ahead. And actually, as a recruiter, worst case scenario, if you're 18, you set up your own business, do it for 2 years and it doesn't work, you're still going to be able to get just as good job as a 20-year-old who's had 2 years in their working career. So really, if you want to do it, it's tough. Surround yourself with really great people. Don't think about your business costs. And if you haven't got the risks, do it. Surround yourself with good people. There's lots of people in Oxfordshire, 2 of them on this call, that will help you. And just do it. Just do it. To use the phrase of Nike, there we go.
I love it. I absolutely love that advice. So I'm going to come off here and I'm going to get you, before you come off this call in the studio space, I'm going to get you booked on so we can explore your whys. But thank you very much for stepping into the host seat. The hot seat. So thank you.
Thank you so much for asking me.